In the final weeks of 1970, the badly burned remains of a woman were discovered on the side of a remote Norwegian valley. To this day, her true identity remains unknown. This is the story of the Isdal Woman, and the mystery that continues to haunt Norway.
Like, share, and subscribe to Bad Time Stories 2 for more true horror and mystery. Tap the channel now to watch the full video.
The historic city of Bergen, nestled along Norway's western coast, lies surrounded by a chain of 7 mountains. The tallest among them is Mount Ulriken, towering 643 meters above sea level. Winding along its northern face is a trail known as the Isdalen Valley, or as locals call it, Death Valley. It was here, on a freezing November evening in 1970, that a lone hiker descending the mountain crossed paths with 3 mysterious figures walking uphill. He was immediately struck by how out of place they seemed in the rugged, snow-covered terrain. Leading the group was a well-dressed middle-aged woman, shivering in the cold, wearing no protective outer clothing. Behind her followed 2 tall men, both dressed in dark, lightweight jackets, far too thin for the conditions. As they drew closer, the hiker noticed the woman's face, pale, beautiful but marked by deep sadness, almost fear. When she neared him, she slowed her pace and reached out as if to take his hand. But before she could speak, one of the men stepped in quickly, grabbed her arm, and pulled her forward. Without a word, the 3 continued up the path and vanished into the fog. The hiker paused, uneasy. She had clearly needed help, but what could he have done against 2 men? He continued his descent, deciding he would report the strange encounter. Soft, ambient shift. The next morning he visited the local police station and described what he had seen. But the officer on duty dismissed his concern with a sigh, asking why it was any of his business. Feeling brushed off, the hiker left and tried to forget about it. 5 days later, he opened his morning newspaper and froze. The front page screamed with a headline, "Woman found burned to death on Mount Ulriken." Music intensifies. Even before this discovery, the Isdalen Valley had a grim reputation. Locals called it Death Valley because of the number of suicides that had taken place there. Mountain rescue workers had long dreaded its slopes, but this time, it was no suicide. On the morning of November 29th, a man hiking with his 2 teenage daughters stumbled upon a strange sight. On a large boulder lay what looked like a suitcase full of clothes, neatly arranged as if placed there intentionally. When they approached, they were horrified to find the charred remains of a woman hidden between the rocks. They ran for help, and soon police arrived at the scene. The stench of burned flesh filled the cold air. The woman's face had been completely destroyed by fire, her features unrecognizable. Worse still, the tips of her fingers had been scraped or sanded away, as if someone had deliberately tried to remove her fingerprints. Only the small section of her lower back, the part pressed against the cold ground, had escaped the flames. Everything else had been consumed by fire. It was clear. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase her identity. Music fades out slowly, and so began one of the strangest, most chilling unsolved mysteries in Norway's history, the case of the Isdal Woman, where her shoulders and upper arms had been wedged tightly between the rocks the fire had not reached. But the rest of her body, and everything she wore, was burned and blackened beyond recognition. One of the officers lifted a brown fur hat lying nearby and noticed it smelled strongly of petrol. It appeared that the woman had been soaked in fuel before being set alight. Scattered around her were a few strange items: a broken umbrella, several pieces of jewelry, an empty bottle of cheap liqueur, an empty packet of sleeping tablets, and a few half-filled water bottles. Any documents that might have identified her, a passport, an ID card, were missing. Disturbed and confused, the officers began collecting evidence and recovering the body for examination. The results of the autopsy, however, only deepened the mystery. While dark bruises were found and photographed at the base of her neck, suggesting she had been struck or restrained, this was not determined to be the cause of death. Instead, the coroner concluded that the woman had died from poisoning, after ingesting at least 50 sleeping pills. It remained unclear whether she was still alive when she was set on fire. Adding to the mystery, every single label, tag, or identifying mark had been cut away from her clothing, making it impossible to trace where they came from. For several days, detectives found themselves completely without leads, until a sudden breakthrough changed everything. Partial fingerprints taken from the body were found to match 2 suitcases that had been discovered at Bergen's central train station. Both cases had been clearly searched and tampered with before police found them. Inside, investigators discovered skin lotion with the prescription label carefully cut off, 2 separate sums of money, 500 German Deutschmarks, and 130 Norwegian kroner, along with several everyday items. There was also a postcard from an Italian photographer who lived in Bergen. When officers located and questioned him, they believed they had finally found someone who could identify the mystery woman. But this too led nowhere. The photographer confirmed he had met her and even taken her to dinner. She told him she was from Johannesburg and was traveling through Norway to visit tourist sites for 6 months. He never saw her again after that night. When police contacted the South African consulate, they learned she had lied about her nationality. Music deepens, investigative tone. With no progress from local inquiries, the police released photos and sketches of the woman across Europe through newspapers and Interpol. Information poured in from several countries, but none of it confirmed who she really was. Investigators learned that before coming to Norway, the woman had traveled extensively across Europe, using multiple fake passports and false identities. Across various hotel logs, she had used at least 9 different names, including Fenella Lancia, Vera Jarl, Claudia Schenk, and Claudia Nielsen. Witnesses who encountered her reported she spoke several languages fluently, including German, Flemish, French, and English. She also frequently changed her hair color and style, using wigs and dyes to disguise herself. To some, she claimed to be an antiques dealer. To others, a traveling saleswoman. No one could say for sure who she truly was, or what she was doing in Norway. After years of dead ends, the police eventually closed the case, recording her death as a suspected suicide. But almost no one believed that conclusion. Not the press, not the public, and not even some of the officers who worked the case. It simply didn't make sense. If she had taken 50 sleeping pills, how could she have wedged herself between the rocks and then set herself on fire? Her injuries and the position of her body suggested that someone else had been there. someone who didn't want her to be found. The first and most chilling theory is that she was murdered. Perhaps the two men seen with her days earlier were her captors, forcing her to take the sleeping pills before striking her and setting the fire. Maybe her attempt to reach out to the young hiker on the trail was a desperate cry for help that went unanswered. A second possibility is that she did take her own life. But the two men were there to honor her final request, to destroy her body and identity so no one would ever know who she truly was. And then there's a third, more disturbing theory, that her death was part of a ritual, a coded act that carried meaning known only to those involved. Many have long believed the Isdal Woman was a spy. The case took place at the height of the Cold War, when Norway was a strategic location between the Western powers and the Soviet bloc. The woman's access to multiple passports, disguises, and international funds strongly suggests she was working for a well-financed intelligence network. Music rises with tension. Among the other items found inside her suitcases was something that would deepen that suspicion even further. Among the items found by investigators was a small diary filled with handwritten coded notes. Though the messages have never been fully deciphered, experts believe that the dates match the woman's movements across Norway, and possibly align with the testing of a new missile system known as the Penguin. This theory was supported by a local fisherman who claimed to have seen her near the northern city of Stavanger. Around the same time, a large military exercise was taking place there. The mystery of the Isdal Woman bears striking similarities to another unexplained death, the Tampered case in Australia. On the morning of December 1st, 1948, an unidentified man in his 40s was discovered slumped against a seawall at Somerton Park Beach in Adelaide. His cause of death was never determined, though poisoning was strongly suspected. Just like the Isdal Woman, all labels had been removed from his clothing, and a suitcase found nearby had been stripped of anything that might reveal his identity. He too carried coded notes, leading many to believe he had been a spy. In 2017, after decades of speculation, the Norwegian police reopened the Isdal Woman's case as part of a cold case review. Although her DNA still failed to match any record in the Interpol database, new analysis by the University of Bergen revealed remarkable details about her origins. Handwriting studies suggested she had been educated in Western Europe, with France as the most likely country. Scientists then analyzed isotopes in her teeth, hoping to trace her childhood environment. The data suggested she had likely been born and raised in Germany during the 1930s, possibly near Nuremberg. Later in life, she appeared to have moved to either France or Belgium. Evidence also showed that she had undergone expensive dental work in a non-European country, perhaps in South America or Asia. This paints a haunting picture. A woman who grew up in Nazi Germany, survived World War II, and may have been repatriated to a Western Allied nation afterward. During the Cold War, she could have been working for a government agency, possibly as a spy, traveling through Europe under multiple identities, observing and documenting events. At some point, her actions may have drawn the attention of powerful people who decided she was a threat that needed to be silenced. Whether it was her enemies who erased her identity, or her own organization covering up what happened, remains unknown. What we do know is this: her life ended in a cold, calculated way, hidden from the world. On February 5th, 1971, the Isdal Woman was given a Catholic funeral and buried in an unmarked grave. Even if she had no immediate family, it's almost impossible to believe that not a single relative's DNA has ever surfaced. Perhaps the answer lies in the shadows of history, a past erased by war, secrecy, and espionage. Or perhaps those who know the truth have ensured it remains buried forever. Whatever her story truly was, the manner of her death is heartbreaking. And until her name is known, The Isdal Woman will remain one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in the world.
Like, share, and subscribe to Bad Time Stories 2 for more true horror and mystery. Tap the channel now to watch the full video.